Like, I don't think I
Yeah.
would be the best version of myself in, that scenario playing out. Like, that's just not where I'm going to thrive. Like, I'm like really low key. So if I was put in a high stress situation, like it was my wedding, I think I would not be like the nicest, best version of myself. So like, I get
Hmm.
it, like, I'm like, I can understand. Like, I have some understanding of that. Um, is that your dog?
Yes.
Yeah, just ran in and did a U-turn.
Welcome to the Focus AF podcast, guys. My name is Ben.
I'm Karis.
This is Jen.
And this is Ro.
And I'm definitely not focused AF. This is take two. I totally forgot to press the record button. We already recorded a good 5-10 minutes of this, so
Yo, I been there, done that. It happens. Like, I feel like my virtual podcast, like anytime I've been on a podcast, it's just always chaotic if I have to do it virtually because of like my house is crazy, the dogs are crazy, everything's crazy. So I seem to just like chaos just follows me around. So I'm not surprised that
It's your fault, Kelly.
It just chaos literally just follows me around.
because I saw the button, I was like, "Why is that the button still there? It's not supposed to be there, right?"
Yep, it happens.
All right. So anyway, our guest today is someone who came into my life through some Facebook groups and whatnot. And one of the first things that I noticed about her was the volume of weddings that she was doing. It was really nice to come across another colleague who was doing that high volume, who wasn't necessarily a studio. She was doing all this work herself. And the thing that we had in common was a lot of people were in kind of disbelief that we were doing this kind of volume and we're still in one piece. You know what I mean? And how about you guys? How did you guys come across our guest today?
Pretty much the same
Mhm.
in Facebook group, Better Together, Speakeasy. From what I've noticed, it was always like someone trying to like have an excuse on why they're slow, and Kelly will always chime in and be like, "Hey, I'm not slow, so
That's a work.
Yeah.
Hustle.
yeah." And like a lot of people would take it across as like she was bragging, but I always saw it as like she's giving you the truth, right? Like obviously she's doing a ton of weddings, she's still booking a ton of weddings, so there's something wrong there that you need to fix, right? So I always saw her chiming in and posts like that, and I always loved it. I was like, yeah, you know what? She's giving them the hard truth, and they don't want to accept it.
Right. Exactly. So anyway, without further ado, before I screw this thing up again, right? I'd like to introduce you guys to our guest today, Kelly C. Welcome to the podcast.
Welcome.
Hey, hi.
Welcome.
I would say your whole name, but I might
It's okay.
chop
You
it
don't
up.
have to say it. Don't say it. Don't say it.
Well, welcome to the podcast. Welcome to the shit show.
We're a little rusty. It's been.
I
a
love
while.
it. I love it. Like I said, chaotic. Like, you're gonna hear my dogs bark. Like, things just go wild over here. It just is what it is. And
Yeah.
I'm like big for me and my brand on being authentic. So I don't live in like a perfect house doing perfect things. We don't have a perfect kitchen or a perfect life. So I share what I can in terms of social media and like how I'm portraying myself online. So I don't want to be different than like how I actually am, because then when I show up at people's weddings, they're going to be like, whoa, that's not who we thought we hired. So I appreciate your authenticity, and I am right there with you.
Yeah, we're all about like, just like being real and just being who we are. I think that's kind of what, at least for me, that's what attracted me to the Melinas as well. They they tell me when I'm full of shit, right? And I appreciate it because it keeps me in check.
Yeah.
And vice versa. So like we keep each other honest, and that's what you need. You need a community of people to keep you in
To
check.
be honest, yep.
Yeah, we appreciate all that. So, one of the first things that we like to do is introduce our guests, right? Why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself, how long you've been in business, all this stuff. Tell us a little bit about you.
So I've been shooting weddings for 14 years, which seems insane to say. I've been doing photography longer than that, but I've been actively like shooting professionally, I would say, for 14 years. For most of us, I think you're probably the same. For the first 2 years, like I still hesitate to call myself a professional, but It was what it was in the early days. But I definitely I got started doing just landscape type things. I think we all start out that way. I was shooting like beaches and seagulls and really overcooked HDR and all
Some
of
flowers
that.
here and there.
Flowers, yeah, like weird vines outside and anything like that. So I was, photographing those types of things. And then I put an ad on Craigslist back when you could do ads on the services section. It's funny because there is a fellow photographer. I don't know if you guys know Jamie Bodo or not, but she was also advertising on Craigslist at the same time that I was advertising on Craigslist. And we do know each other. She eventually worked with me for a couple weddings as a second. So it was funny. It all kind of came full circle a couple years back. But just we were advertising on Craigslist, and I ended up picking up a couple of family portraits and like a wedding off of Craigslist.
We're just cracking up.
I was like, take the dogs out. He's in the podcast. But yeah, so I ended up booking a couple of things off of Craigslist, and from there it just kind of grew and grew. But I initially really got jobs off of Craigslist. So I never worked as a second photographer for other people. I didn't really learn from anybody else. It was really just kind of learning everything for myself in the beginning and, going through all of that. So I'm very much self-taught and never really had anyone to guide me in the industry, which honestly, looking back, I'm kind of happy for that because I feel like that made me who I am today. And I think if I had worked under people, I think I would be a very different photographer and a very different business person. So I am happy that, I had the opportunity to just kind of go through it for myself and be on my, own journey and photograph weddings that were appropriate for me to be shooting at the time when I was a beginner, at appropriate price points. I didn't have all these voices in my ears telling me, what to do or how to run a business. I was just kind of feeling it out. But that was how I came up in the industry, no real great origin story. I was a librarian for 10 years. So I actually had gone, I got a master's degree in library science. I thought that my librarian career was my career. For most people, it is. That is very much a passion career. People get into that and they think they're going to do it for their whole life. So I thought that I would. It was a good county job. I had nice benefits. The pay was terrible. But I thought that was it. I was like, okay, I got my career. I got my master's degree. Like, this is going to be, this is my life. This is what it is. But I was still doing photo on the side while I was working as a librarian. Always thought that it would be a side hustle. Never thought I would be able to go full time with it, knowing how competitive this industry is because it's incredibly competitive. And New Jersey is incredibly saturated with photographers. Even when I started, that was true. I think it's even more true now. I think that has just, kind of exacerbated. But I just didn't think I would ever be able to go full time. And then, looking at my numbers one day, it kind of started to become apparent that it was possible. So for around 2 years, I just kind of grinded it out. And my initial financial goal I discovered was not enough to leave my full-time job. So I had to, raise my financial goal for a couple of years to what my leave point was going to be for my 9 to 5. So I quietly, raised that. It took me a little bit. But once I hit it, I put in my notice and I quit. And the day that I left, like all my coworkers were in the back of the library, like waving me goodbye. I was in my like old 2002 Tacoma pickup with like all my stuff in the bed. So I had like all this office stuff like from the library, like in the truck bed, and we're all like crying together. And it was just such like a turning point moment like in my life, like that leaving to go do photography full time. And initially I really thought that I was going to have regrets about it because I had, left a county job with good benefits and, some PTO and all of that. But I have really never regretted my decision. I have been completely confident in it for 6 years now, 5 or 6 years. So I still feel good about it. I have zero regrets that I decided to do photo full time, but it is a scary industry to be in. I will say that.
So you've been full time 6 years. So while you were kind of juggling 2 jobs, right? What kind of volume were you doing that moment when you were quitting?
I think I had 45 weddings the last year that I was also working full time.
Goodness gracious.
Part
That's
time.
And that's her part time, right? That's her.
tough.
Those are her part time hours.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
How
It
long were
wasn't
these?
easy. Yeah, it wasn't
Yeah, of
easy. I
course
mean,
not. Yeah.
I'm not going to say that it was like, I was having the time of my life, but I always knew that it was going to be an end, like it was a means to an end. So I knew that I had a goal that I was working towards. So that made it more palatable. It was a tough time. Like I was very, very busy, but having been through that and having that as like a perspective, now, with how busy I was at that point, this still feels like I have more time flexibility than that time in my life because, I'm not beholden to a 9 to 5 and doing this. I have complete
Yeah.
flexibility to do this now. So the perspective really helps, having even just having the 9 to 5, like having that perspective is really helpful because, I did have a 9 to 5. I know exactly what that was like. So
Mhm.
this type of
Yeah.
flexibility is, so amazing now to have.
Mhm.
The
So
best.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, what I loved about entrepreneurship, and this is the part that always appealed to me, was that I have worked those 9 to 5 jobs before. I have worked those hourly jobs before. And the thing is, the harder you work, you got someone on the 13th floor or the 50th floor that decides how much more you're going to make per hour or whatever your salary is going to be. But the thing is, with entrepreneurship, if you're doing all the right things, the harder you work, the more money you make. And I felt that that was more appropriate for what we're trying to do here. You should be rewarded for your hard work. You know what I mean? But I think,
oh, 100%. And I still have some connections at the library where I used to work. I actually kind of stayed on as the business manager of their labor union. So I do still have, connections there, and I actually negotiate their contract each year. Um, so I still have a good grasp on, what they're making and those types of financials. And, it didn't matter. Like the amount of work that you did there is 100%. It's not correlated to your pay at all. So you could be, working your butt off, or you could be doing the bare minimum and you would make the exact same. And I'm the type of person that's more rewarded when the work that I'm doing like is commensurate to what I'm making financially. Like I'm very motivated that way. So that type of job was always just going to be like a harder fit for me because there was really like no reward for going above and beyond. Like it was a
Yep.
harder match mentally. Like it actually wore on me more. Whereas this, I feel like, the amount of work that you do is really tied to the amount of money that you make. So that is like almost cyclical in like my motivation.
hmm
So
Mhm.
I am very well suited, for this type of work just because of how I'm motivated and, like what keeps me going in business.
hmm yeah,
Yeah. And I came from a nonprofit world too. So like what you said, like those are very, very low paying jobs working for the city or nonprofits. And I remember making what I made and then seeing what my boss made, the COO of the nonprofit. And I was like, I will never make as much money as she does. Now I do plus more. And I'm like, she's a COO. Like she was a lawyer. Like it's crazy to me. And then she chose to do nonprofit because whatever.
It's less stressful, probably.
It's
Less
a
stress,
passion.
whatever.
It's a
But
passion project though. A lot of people,
yeah.
like all the library people, like that's a passion career typically. So I
Mm-hmm.
kind of ended up in it like through convenience, but for a lot of people, like that is their like this is my
That's right.
passion, but like that for a lot of
Mhm.
people is. But I felt the exact same as you did. Like when I looked at the director at the library, I was like, oh my gosh, I will like never make that much money. When that was my perspective, like what she was making versus what I was making. And now
Mhm.
I'm eclipsing that like so many times over that is crazy. But
Mhm.
I'd never thought that that would be like something that could happen, like while I was
Mhm.
working there. So, just to see like how my life kind of twisted. I'm like, this is wild. This is crazy. Like what's going on here?
And not
But
even just in that previous world of working for for the county or me working for a nonprofit, but also when we started in the industry and we would see what the big name photographers
Oh
were
my God,
making, and we
yeah.
were like, oh my, I could
Like we would
never,
never make that
that'll
much.
never
what
Yeah.
numbers were you guys looking
happen.
at when you were
We
looking at
were
the people you're
like,
admiring?
I remember a Creative Live. I think this is how long ago with Susan Stripley's Creative Live,
Yeah.
and she was making at the time like 375, 400, and
Mm.
$1,000 a year, and we were like, holy shit! Like she's making that as a wedding photographer, right? And at the time, we're like, I'll be happy with a quarter of that, or
Yeah.
like
Let me
or a
make
half of that.
100K. You know those
Yeah.
6 figures that you always have to reach.
I remember going to a wedding show, and there's a photographer there who shall not be named, right? But he was there, and he was charging like 4,000 at the time, and I was around 2,000 at the time,
Mhm.
and I was like, "Oh my gosh, you charge 4,000 for coverage?" And then he was showing me these
Yeah.
books, right? I was like, "How much you charging for these books?" It was like 2 grand for the book. I was like, "What? 2 grand for the book too?" Right? And like, in hindsight, I mean, yeah, this was like almost 10 years ago now, right? So it's amazing to see, um, your own growth. You never know how
Yep.
far you've gone. You guys have heard the Dunning-Kruger effect, right? So the Dunning-Kruger effect also applies to folks who have, I guess, imposter syndrome as well. You don't realize how far you've actually gone. Some folks actually underestimate how much they actually know, right? But unfortunately, I think in our current landscape, the opposite is true. People don't know what they don't know, right? So,
Mhm.
so they think they know a lot more than they do, and that's not the case. But Kelly, there's one thing that we like to ask all of our guests. So 14 years ago, when you got your first wedding on Craigslist, how much were you charging, and what kind of coverage were you looking at?
I believe the first everything that I did was free because
Mm.
I knew that I was not like good and I didn't want to put financial pressure on myself because I wasn't exactly sure how I was going to perform. So I'm pretty sure like the first several things that I did were free. And then maybe the first like wedding that I did like officially under my name was I want to say like $200 and probably like a 4-hour coverage. And I ironically still end up at this location, not for weddings, but sometimes for prep because it's like this really little Airbnb in Spring Lake that's now called the U at Wellington. But back at that time, it was called Whispers. And I
It's a bed and breakfast
remember
now, I think.
little
It's
bed
a
and
bed and
breakfast.
breakfast.
Yeah. Oh,
Uh-huh.
and it always was. So the
Uh-huh.
first wedding that I shot there, it was still a bed and breakfast. Honestly, the
Uh-huh.
interior looks very, very similar. But
Hmm.
I remember going in there and I struggled so hard, so much struggle. And everything about it, it was like tungsten light. Like, what do you do with that? I think I had bought an on-camera flash just for that wedding. So I had like this measly little like $100 on-camera flash and was trying to figure out like
That's
exactly
still a
how to
hundred
make
dollar
that work.
profit in your pocket.
Right. Well, I mean, at the end of the day, it's but it was very frustrating. And I remember just working there and feeling really defeated and really frustrated because I just wasn't, getting what I thought that I was able to get. And it's now I've been able to redeem myself at that location, which always feels really nice because I go there and I can have some redemption for that first wedding. But I just remember struggling so hard. And of course, it was raining. It was the day before Hurricane Sandy. It was just not a day that you could really like be outside and do anything. So I just remember struggling so hard. But yeah, I think it was $200, probably two hundred
That's
dollars.
that's three and a third Moses Cruises. 3.3. So we're gonna cut him off right. I don't know. We're gonna keep the bottom third or the top third. Dirty is gonna
Well,
surprise
half
us.
of the face.
That's definitely pretty smart on your behalf of like, I'm not going to charge you because if I do charge you, you could sue me if I screw up.
Mm.
What are you gonna charge? What are you gonna sue me for? I didn't charge you anything for it.
Well, that's
Yeah, it was
yeah. They
free.
can't ask for a refund. Like I didn't take anything, and that was always like my mindset because I mean, when I first like got my LLC and put everything together, I had an accountant. He's still my accountant, and he's still great. But when I asked him to put together my LLC, the really the only question that I had for him was, if we do this, how easy is it to undo this when I fail? Because I just didn't think that there was a world where this was going to be a success. So I was really worried that I was going to have this crazy idea, get this LLC, start this business. It was going to mess up my own personal finances somehow. And I was worried that I was going to have this like ghost LLC just like following me forever. And it was always just going to be like a problem on my taxes. So that was my question, was literally, Dave, if I mess this up, how easy can you undo this? And he said that it was easy enough to undo. So I went forward.
Mhm.
But I really, thought that this was not going to be a thing that I was going to be able to pursue. So yeah, it was free for a while, and then it was quite low priced for a while as I gained confidence, because I just didn't want to, overcharge when I wasn't 100% certain that I was going to be able to perform.
I think we all did free shoots.
Yeah.
Carousel, did
Yeah.
you do free shoots when you first launched your brand? Well, she's a big
Kara's
effing deal.
She didn't have to. She had all the content she shot with you over 10 years.
But Melina, did you guys shoot for free? Like,
Of course. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I remember one time we were like doing free engagement sessions with the hope that they would come back to book us for their wedding a year, 2 years, 3 years down the line.
Never happened.
No,
No.
it didn't happen, but someone referred us to their friend and they booked us. But so we did get something out of it. But we were just trying to do everything. We were just we would travel and find couples to shoot there, like just to get content. We did a lot of weddings for cheap, like, and typically when you're in that price range, just like Kelly mentioned, like you shoot at like these raw places that have like no windows, basements, like where you like as a beginner, it's one of the hardest, like the hardest times to really be out there learning. I remember like the churches that we used to shoot in the beginning, like it was tough. It was tough.
Yep.
Yeah, I remember. I only shot it free for a couple of for a couple of weddings, and I remember. And you guys know, I'll shoot for. I'll you know I will travel for free shoots and stuff, right? And I'm originally from Maryland, or that's where my network is anyway, right? So I remember I was offering these free family shoots down in Maryland, and I was already on the bus. I already took the bus from the city. I'm on my way down to DC, and my friends called like, "Oh, we can't make it." I'm already like almost past Philly at that point, and they're like, "Yeah, it's not happening. This shoot, we got to reschedule." And I was like, "What am I going to do this weekend? I'm already on my way down to DC." So the things that we have to go through for our craft, right?
Yeah.
But I think like that's that type of like scrappy attitude I just don't see as much anymore. Like at the beginning, I was willing to shoot like anything and everything in order to get experience, in order to, find sessions, in order to get content. I was literally willing to do whatever it took. Like I had my friends, like I used to have my friends dress up and take them out, and have an idea and be like, okay, I want to go shoot here. Like I think the light's going to be good here. I'll get something good here. Like I was constantly trying to figure out like how I could get content to post on my socials, or how I could get content, to blog or put on my site, like anything. And I feel like now there's almost this expectation that, you come into the industry, you immediately charge, and you're immediately photographing, higher level things. And then there's this like frustration when people don't get that immediately, and it's almost like, I don't know, it's like that scrappiness that's like, I will like claw my way, like into this, because that's how I was. Like, I literally clawed my way in. So, I just, whenever I see like all the stuff online, because now education is so prevalent, like it's just people think, oh, I took 2 courses, like I'm 100% like good to go, to shoot whatever wedding comes at me. And it's just an interesting thought process to, see play out. But
Yeah.
I appreciate the hustle. I appreciate the hustle.
Oh yeah.
Did you ever attend workshops or take classes, or did you learn everything on the field?
I learned everything in the field. So I never bought any classes. I never took any workshops. I didn't even really know that other photographers existed until I think Jamie Bodo invited me to Speakeasy. I think it was her. I think it was Jamie, because she was working for me. She was seconding for me. And she was like, oh, like join whatever, this group or what have you. And I ended up joining it. And I was like, oh my gosh, there's other photographers. There's others. There's a lot of others. There's so many others. And they're all here, and they all network here. But I didn't really have a grip on how photographers were talking or communicating, because it's hard to find. Like if you're a photographer and you're not online, how on earth do you find other photographers? It's not, you don't just run it. I mean, I guess you could run into one on the street, but it's not like there's a whole network of them, or they're putting up posters like, come meet us here, on this day. It's just not that way. So it was crazy when I found the others, but I didn't ever, I didn't do any of that workshop stuff or, buy any online courses. So, everything that I learned was the hard way. It was all self-taught. Like I learned not to shoot in JPEG because I shot something in JPEG and it sucked. I learned white balance because I shot something in JPEG, couldn't correct the white balance, and then had to understand white balance.
Mhm.
So every single thing that I learned was just really like the hard way.
The hard way.
The hard
Well, that's the
way.
best way to learn. If you're smart, it only has to happen once. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah, we
Yep.
didn't make a lot of friends starting out. I think in the first
Similar
six
to us. Yep.
yeah, first 6 years we kind of kept to ourselves because we're introverted, right, Molinas? Right?
Right. Well, your wife is.
But we kept to ourselves for the first 6 years or so, 6, 7 years, and I think the first friend that we made was Vanessa Joy, and then the second one we made was probably Moses, and then shortly after Moses, were the Molinas. Was Moses at that meetup at the?
No.
He-
He didn't go to
No,
together, yeah.
he had not. That was our first WPI, right? So
Yeah.
I think he started coming like 2 years later.
Yeah,
3
and that's
years
where we
later,
met the
yeah.
Molinas, and then even after I met them, for the first few years, I was kind of hesitant about joining all these groups, these Facebook groups and stuff, because I just want to work, and I think
Now you can't get him out of them.
I'm now I'm the all-star contributor for both of these groups,
Yeah.
right?
All of them.
Top poster.
Like I can't, anyway, I mean, like that, this is what happens. I knew that this was going to happen. So, I resisted joining, but here we are. Yeah, you guys take over.
I get
For
it though,
me, it
Ben.
was-
I get it though, Ben, because when I see you, right, I imagine that you're like me. And I don't know if this is true or not, but I consider myself to be more of a business person than a photographer. And I'm just as interested in business as I am in photography. So I'm interested in the data points. I'm interested in the numbers. I'm interested in the markets, what other people are doing with their businesses, what they're seeing in terms of like their market, what the pricing, like I'm interested in all of that. So the way that it's easiest to find it is in the groups. If you're interested in that, like those are great data points for the state of the market and how things are going. So I do, I like going in there and reading. I don't always comment, but I see the draw and like I see the stuff that Ben like comments on and gets involved in, and I feel like we have like some of the same motivations as to why we would be interested like in those topics.
Mhm.
Because I definitely am like I'm more interested in the business side sometimes than the photography side.
Mhm.
So I can see it. Like I'm
Mhm.
also an introvert. More of an introvert. I definitely can be extroverted when I have to be, but like my preference, like I've pretty much been sitting in my house as much as I can sit in my house in my off season. Like I don't want to leave. It takes a lot to get me to leave. So I'm definitely like I have my introverted moments, but when I'm out working, like that is my social time. But I only have so much in my social tank. So I do, run it low sometimes and I have to go refuel it. So I don't have like an endless supply of extroversion. I have enough.
See, Kelly gets it, right?
Sure. You have
Okay,
unlimited.
Ben.
Sure.
She stays home though, man.
Yeah, she's not at every meetup. She's not at
Your tank is
conferences.
unlimited.
You guys don't understand me.
You-
That's all it is.
You have a big charging pack on your back.
He's got a battery pack. He's got a little battery
Yeah,
pack
yeah.
and he just brings
Yep.
it along.
Yep.
But your career as a librarian, it all makes sense now.
I wasn't
Everyone
like
has
your
to be quiet.
typical, I was not your typical librarian though. Like I like to read and that's why I figured I would be okay doing that. Like cuz I liked books, I like the reading aspect. There's a lot of things about the career that are interesting. And I did public reference for a portion of my career and then I actually ended up in the technology department for the later part of my career. So I stopped pretty much doing public service. But for a large part of my career, I was on the information desk doing what you would probably think a librarian would do, which is talking to people about book recommendations, answering questions, random questions. People would come up and ask us bizarre questions.
Like what? I want to hear these.
Like how do you become a Franciscan friar?
What?
How do you play the trombone? And we would have to find the answers. I mean, obviously, I can't teach someone to play a trombone, but I can point you to the place where you can get trombone lessons, or where you can sign up for a trombone class, or you can find groups of Franciscan friars who will maybe talk to you. Like that was literally my job. Was just aggregating information for people.
But you knew
So
this off
I
the top of your head, or you're doing some research for them?
no, we had like where we could research for them. We had access to different databases. So you had to know where to look and, know what you could recommend. And, part of it was really curating the internet for people, figuring out what was good information versus bad information, to give someone. Like, you always wanted to find reputable sources. But I was very, like public facing for a large part of my career. So it was something that required people skills. And I worked in food service. I was a waitress. I scooped ice cream for a long time. So I have definitely had front facing, like people oriented careers before photography. And worked in hospitality essentially. So this was easy for me. But I think photography is largely hospitality. Like, I think it's mostly customer service.
Yep.
It's obviously you got to take pictures too, but I think it's largely customer service.
1,000%. My wife and I say that all the time. We're in the service industry.
Mhm.
The thing that we're serving just happens to be photographs, but at
Yep.
the end of the day, we just want happy customers, and
Mhm.
you just got to find out what makes them happy and serve it to them. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So when along in your journey did you decide to maintain like a high volume as a solo shooter?
So I never really made an active decision to do that. And I told Ben earlier, I don't really consider myself to be high volume. When I went full time with photography, I always assumed that I was going to work it like the job that I had. So I had a 9 to 5 job, which I was completely like, I was at peace with working it. Like it was what it was. I had a 9 to 5, I was okay with that. So I did not get into photography assuming that I was going to work astronomically less. I just didn't like get into it thinking that it was like a get rich quick scheme, or that not that anybody thinks that, but I do think there's this like thought in the industry that like, oh, well, I can get into this and I can, just make as much money I can as in as least time as I can. And I kind of came into it like, I will work the hours that I was working and I'm going to work this like a job and we're just going to see where it goes. So, that led to me taking higher volume because I wasn't like fine. Like if I was working, say 30 weddings a year, like I wouldn't be working that much at home, like, or what I was accustomed to. So I knew my threshold for like ability of what I could work was just higher. I was already doing it. So I was like, I can just, keep going. Like, why would I stop? So my threshold for what I was willing to book was just always going to be higher because I came into it just assuming I was going to basically work a 9 to 5, but for myself. Like that was just the mindset that I had. So even last year, because I shot 99 weddings, that was my like strongest season in terms of getting work done, being efficient. I never had a queue. I finished, I think, editing like every single wedding like in a week just because I had the editing process so down. So I had really fine-tuned what I was doing. And I think I had, ironically, like the most free time that I had had just because I had fine-tuned my processes, but I shot the most. But like when you know what you can do, and I wasn't really dying, like I was fine. Like I said, after 99, like I came out of it and was like, okay, like that was fine. Like that was totally fine. And that's not the case for most people, but I came out of that and I was like, we're good. I probably just because my fall got like a little bit heavier. I can't say that I would ever take 99 again or that I would get the opportunity to take 99 again because I knew that the industry was taking a little bit of a turn in 2024. I could see that I was hearing the hoofbeats. And I saw that people were booking differently. The market was different. The couples were different. So I saw some changes in the industry in 2024. So I thought to myself, let's just take everything that we can possibly take for 2024, which I was kind of doing anyways, but I dedicated myself a little bit more to it because I don't know what's going to come down the pike for the industry. And at least I can have a really, really good year if things are going to get weird, and I will have a great 2024. And it ended up being fine. But I don't know that even if I set out this year to book 99 weddings, that I would be able to. I have like 76 right now, I think, for 2025, which is still for most people like, what, Kelly, what are you doing? But I do think that the market is different. They're booking on a tighter time scale, so I'm seeing literally I'm getting inquiries for 3 months from now.
Same.
I'm just seeing a change in the way that people are booking. So I'm not, I have no regrets that I took what I took last year. Like I was confident in that. It felt fine. And I will continue to take as much volume as I can because I tell people I'm in this for for like a good time, not for a long time. So
Yes.
I don't know that I'm going to shoot weddings for 20 more years. Like I can't say that with any type of certainty. I'm 39 right now. I think um, I don't want to say this is a younger person's game, but I don't want to get to a point where it's hard to relate to my couples. Like I can relate to them really well right now. And I feel like because it's a customer service job, the better that you relate to your couples, the more successful that you're going to be. So, in maybe I'm not 5 years, but maybe like 7, 8, 9 years, maybe I want to kind of transition out of the industry and, I'm going to pack that in now while I'm able to and while I'm, booking and the business is going really well. So I would rather do a larger volume in a shorter period of time than try to stretch that out over a longer career, doing this where I think it just might get difficult. And who knows, maybe I will be able to still connect with everybody in 10 or 15 years. I don't know, but I already see the the clients and the couples that are coming up now, and they are very different people. They're just very different people. There's already like a little bit of an age gap that I'm always going to worry about. And I do my best to keep up with stuff. Like I'm shooting blurry photos, guys. I'm shooting blurry photos and I see like I can see the charm in that. I can see the charm in it, but it wasn't something that I was automatically drawn to, and that I'm like ultra stoked to shoot. I will absolutely do it. And if I see an opportunity for it, I'm doing it. But it even took a mental shift for me to be open to the style of what's really popular now, which is flash,
Direct flash.
direct flash, and blurry pictures and motion blur and vibes.
Yep.
Vibes.
Yep.
So I'm adapting, but I worry that the further
So are
along I
we.
go in age, that it's going to be harder and harder for me to adapt. I think I'm just realistic about it. Like I would love to say like, oh yeah, I'll 100% like, adapt no problem in 10 years and I won't have any resistance to this. But I can see how it gets harder and harder as you go along, for sure.
Yeah. But at least you have the willingness to adapt. So there's not so many people who don't.
And there's also the reality is our couples stay the same age, if not younger, and we're getting older.
Yeah.
Right.
There are some people in the industry that are still successful, and I was asking around recently for a recommendation for someone to be on the podcast that's like 55 and over, that's still killing it in our market, and I can't find anyone in our area that's like in that age range, 55 to 60, that's still doing this.
Well, we know them. We just don't like them.
No, I don't know if they're I don't know if they're killing it as they present.
And if
they're killing it for photographers.
Right.
And photographers gravitate towards their work and I think it's amazing. But like, are they working? And like you just don't know these things.
And I'm talking about the scope of weddings, because there's a lot of people that I know that are killing it, and they're doing like studio portraits, they're doing newborns, like they're not in the wedding industry. So I feel like once you start looking at that, it kind of speaks for itself of where that shelf life is in this industry.
And it's painful. That's a painful thing, to admit, but I try to be just realistic because I'm not going to do I don't do myself any favors pretending. So like I have to be realistic about, what longevity looks like in this industry, what retirement might look like in this industry, because I knew what it was going to look like for my other career. I knew exactly what that was going to look like. And it's definitely very different doing this. So I'm very into like security, and I tend to be more conservative financially, just with things like I don't take as many risks in that way. So for me, doing this volume at this time is a conservative way just to kind of like set myself up financially. It's like, I'm swinging conservatively, not knowing what my longevity is going to look like in the industry.
And I think that's something that's never really spoken about.
Oh yeah.
And why we collectively in this group right now try and take as much as we can and really hit the ground running, hustling, get weddings. Like we've in the 5 years haven't really slacked or fallen back on like what we have to do to keep pushing forward, because like there is a shelf life to this and we have to keep preparing ourselves for 10, 15 years from now.
Yep.
Yeah, my friends have been watching this body fall apart for the last 3 years, So like they're watching it live. So we don't know how long this thing's gonna last. I remember when about 10 years ago, we also attended another networking function, and it's just we were talking to other photographers. They've been doing it for 20, 30 years or whatever, and they're just telling me how they used to rock and roll back in the 90s and the early 2000s, and now it's just quiet. It's crickets. They haven't had an inquiry in months, and yet that year I had like 40 some weddings, and they were amazed. And I
Right.
wasn't doing anything particularly special, but you look at their portfolio. I took a look at their portfolio. Their work has not evolved, had not evolved since the 1990s. So
Hmm.
I realize how important it is to, be self-aware. And it's not nothing necessarily wrong about evolving. You still stay true to yourself, but you know, Madonna evolved, Prince evolved, Michael Jackson evolved, right? I think sometimes our egos get in the way sometimes of
Yeah.
our own success. You know.
It's harder for people that see themselves more as a artist, as like that love the photography aspect of this business, like myself. I don't handle the business aspect of it. Jen does, right? So for me, when I see these changes, it's uncomfortable. But I do know that if I don't adapt and I don't start to go where the trends are, I'm gonna be one of those old people that like, oh my god, you're doing 80 weddings. I just booked my 10th, and I've been in business for 20 years. So, it is uncomfortable, and I feel like it in this industry it's hard because you have photographers that will tell you like you have to be true to yourself. Like you can't just copy everybody and change yourself. And then you have people that are very well and like they know a lot in business and they see where the business is going and they can predict what's going to happen, right? I feel like we have to find that balance, and it's tough for a lot of us to really sit back and admit that, all right, we need to change, we need to make, you know we need to change, evolve as well to be able to keep up.
Oh,
Mhm.
it's so hard because when you're a creative, it becomes very personal. I think it's very personal.
Mhm.
So if you get personally attached to the work, of course, it's going to be really hard for you to, change how you're shooting to what's more marketable or, portray it in a different way. Like that is hard. And I think that one of the things that is my strength is that I don't consider myself to be a creative. Like I consider myself to be more of a service oriented business and
Hmm.
like more into the business side. So I'm like, I obviously care about the work and I care about the technicality of the work and I've developed my skill, doing that over the years, but I'm
Hmm.
not as attached to what like I would want. Like I care just as much about what the couples want, which helps because I don't have that same visceral reaction, to like changing things around as I feel like a lot of people in the industry do. But if you're that creatively driven, like it is hard. I can absolutely see it being really, really hard. And that's such
Hmm.
a like it's such a this industry, like that's what makes it really difficult is because you have to be creative and you have to be a business person. And those things are so, they're actually at odds together, trying to do both if you're really one or the other. So it's very difficult to find a balance of that.
So my
Yeah.
follow-up question to this is, you did 99 weddings last year, and I know that kind of volume is almost it's semi-regular for you too. I know
Mhm.
that's you're usually around that number as well. So what's that post-production look like? I mean, are you using AI? Are you doing everything? I
No,
know the
no
answer to this,
AI.
but
You
yeah.
know the answer. So no AI. I do not use AI. Ironically, I think if I used AI, I think it would take me longer to edit.
Hmm.
Just because I would have to go back and tweak and I would have to review the entire gallery in order to get continuity. So, one of the things that I find that I have always done over the years, it's evolved as I've gone along, is the day of the wedding. I always bring a laptop with me and I will do a same day preview. So, the same day preview is usually around, they've been, I would say, between, say, 30 and 45 photos. So, it's a larger same day preview. So, I will do the same day preview typically before the ceremony or during cocktail hour. And I will actually put that on social media. So I call it a social media preview. I do not upload that in a separate gallery. It's not considered like a sneak peek gallery wise or anything like that. It's literally just for social media, strictly for social media. So when I actually go to edit the wedding, so I do that at the wedding, I do that little preview. And then when it comes time for me to edit the wedding, why is there a thumb? How did that? Did you see that?
Yeah.
Yeah, if
If you
you
do
do
a
your thumbs
heart,
up, it'll
if you
give you
do
a
a
like.
heart, it also
Yeah,
gives hearts.
yeah. It should. I don't know.
I don't know.
I
She
what's going
never.
on.
There it
I
is.
didn't
There
put
you
my
go.
thumb
Ah!
that was very weird. I was like, why is there a thumb there?
If you do
So
double
when
thumbs down, it gives you rain clouds.
no,
It should.
It
mine
should.
doesn't like
Yeah.
it.
Ah!
But when I go to edit the wedding, so I will upload my cards. I use Adobe Camera Raw, not Lightroom, which I do feel shaves off a little bit of time. So there's a bunch of stuff that I do that doesn't shave off a large amount of time per thing, but it shaves off. Like I'm at the point where if I can save seconds, like I will save seconds because that's how streamlined it is. So I upload the cards and I just literally I have a folder on my desktop that says photos, and then I make a folder, put in the raw, put in the CRF files in there, upload the card. I go and grab the XMP sidecars off my laptop. So I will just go grab them, email them to myself, and I will pop that into the folder. So I have all the things that I've previously edited for that preview. And then I literally just start going through the gallery. So in Adobe Camera Raw, you don't really need anything like you don't need Photo Mechanic. You don't there's no need to have a separate culling software that I have found. So I don't make culling a separate step. For me, I have the gallery like in Adobe Camera Raw, I have it open where I can see about it'll be about 6 photos at a time when I'm like scrolling through them. Pretty big. So it's like rows of 3. And I can pretty much go through and cull a batch of them of about 250 is what I do. So I'll pick 250 in order. I will edit them. I run a script to save them down. And then I go back and get 250 more. So each little batch of 250 that I'm doing is taking me, say, like 10 to 15 minutes of time. But I'm literally just going through, editing that 250, running a script to save them down, and then going along. If I have picked a photo that I don't actually want, I slide it all the way to black. So I just go exposure all the way down. So I know not to pick it for the batch. But that's basically culling and editing all in one step. And I don't know that you can do that in Lightroom in that way, because I think that I've used the program and I just feel like it's clunkier. And I've heard people talk about Photo Mechanic, and I'm like, I would never have a need for that, because for me, viewing all the pictures isn't slow. Like I can see them at a large size and I'm culling them as I'm editing them. So like, why would I make that a separate, like there was never a need. So when I saw people talking about Photo Mechanic, I was so confused as to like why there was a desire for it, because in ACR, it's just a lighter program than, Lightroom or Photoshop. Like it doesn't take time to load the pictures. They're all just like those previews, those little thumbnails are right there. And I have them big enough where I can see them. So I just never understood, that desire for the separate culling program. But that's what I do. So I just go through, I batch them down, save them, and then I have them as JPEGs. And also in ACR, you can order them by capture time if you want. Like you could order them just, like you would in Lightroom. But all the editing controls are really the same as you would have in Lightroom. You can do just about everything. It's just like Lightroom's like younger, I guess, weaker cousin, but I don't even know what the weaknesses are at this point, because most of the stuff you can do. The things that you can't do in there, you would probably have to do in Photoshop anyways, to be honest.
How many frames are you leaving every wedding with?
I usually shoot for an average wedding around 2,300 images, and typically they get around, I would say 15 to 1,600 in their final.
That's a very high yield, high keep rate. That's a very high keep rate.
I'm also a very, very intentional shooter. So for me, like I am very particular about my light. I'm very particular about my subject placement. So I have, and again, this is just because I shoot so much. And I feel like I'm photographing more than average people are photographing. So I'm to the point where I can just look and know if the shot's going to be good or not. Like before I take it, I'm like, this is going to be a keeper, that this is not going to be a keeper. So what I'm shooting is really more or less what I intend to keep. But I've gotten very good at kind of placing people and knowing where to stand just to be in the correct position to get people in front of me in the good light doing things, if that makes sense. Like I've almost just like, I'm so used to shooting in like the most consistent light that I can find that I know where I have to be in relation to it in order to get photos. So it makes it much easier, because as I'm going through the day, it's almost instinctive at that point. So, I don't often find myself in scenarios where I'm like, oh, this is going to be, really difficult. I'm not going to like, how am I going to, keep consistency with this lighting scenario? I've also been incredibly fortunate that I have couples who really, really trust me, which is like I know how fortunate I am to have like good couples and people who really trust me, because if I do have a situation where like the light is poor, I will be like, hey guys, this is not a good option for right now. Let's come back and do this later. Because everything that I can do while I'm shooting to keep it clean and to keep like the distractions at bay is going to help me later in editing. So it all becomes
Right.
part of the process. Like I tell my seconds, like if I'm hiring seconds, I'm like, I will not edit out a water bottle. So if you don't take that water bottle out, like I make them sign, like you move it, you have to move it, or like I don't want TVs in the pictures, I don't want these things in the pictures, because I'm not going to do this high level retouching, on things. You have to be aware of what's in your frame. And I also, as a super, I guess this is admitting that I'm just like a boring shooter, but I really favor 50 millimeters. I feel like it's a really nice focal length. And I have gotten to a point where I essentially like see things in 50 millimeters. So like just looking with my eye, I can pretty much tell you what would be in frame with a 50. It's gotten to a point where it's a little crazy. But because I shoot that focal length so much, I know what I can get away with and what I cannot get away with using a 50. And for me, if I put on a 35 prime, because I am a prime shooter all the way, like I don't like zooms. And at this point, if I described why I don't like them, it's so nuanced. People would like come for me with pitchforks, but it is what it is. So I like 50, but because I know that frame so well, I know what I can get away with, how I have to position people to get into the frame. I'm just so dialed into how I'm shooting. It lets me be really, really intentional. And if you have a tighter frame, it's much easier to get to like compose where you're getting a clean shot. If you're really, really wide, I feel like it's much more difficult to compose, to get other things out of your shot. And if you're shooting horizontal, it's even worse. So I tell people, I want you to shoot vertical, because like, let's say that you're in a hotel room. If you're shooting horizontal, the distractions that you're going to get along the side of the image are bonkers.
The
You're
pillows,
probably going to
the
get
bed
that
pillows.
TV. You're probably going to get all this stuff, and you're going to have to do a lot more work in order to even keep your frame clean. But if you shoot vertical, that's going to make it so much easier for you, like in terms of how you're going to frame and compose your shot and keep it nice and, clean. And even with lighting. So if you have like a window over here, if you shoot vertical, a lot of times you can get rid of the haze. But if you're shooting horizontal, you're just opening yourself up to like more difficulty. So I tell people, like, I want you to shoot on a 50 for prep, and I want you to shoot vertical as much as you possibly can.
You hear that, Ro?
Yeah.
You hear that, Ro? More vertical.
I've been increasing my vertical count, but I still do. So you're 100% right on the aspect that it does remove a lot of clutter. Like how many times you show up for groom prep and there's just like 10 suit bags and on top of the bed, and shoes and ties, and like one horizontal frame, you can see the pillows in the corner. Yeah, so like it does get rid of that, and I see what you're saying. Like you're basically like eliminating all that time. Like a lot of my time in editing is cropping and adjusting shadows, exposure, right? So if right off the bat, like I'm not taking that shot because that's gonna it's gonna be hard to edit that, then that'll cut down on your delivery time. And I feel like for most of us, we tend to overshoot because one reason is we don't want to be seen not doing anything, right? So we're always constantly like looking, trying to shoot just to look busy sometimes. But
We shoot
it's
mirrorless
tough.
now, so no one knows that we're clicking anymore. Before, you had to
right.
click.
There's no
right?
sound. There's no sound.
So now there's no longer any sound. So like, hey, I'm
But
working. You just don't hear it. I'm
but
working.
There's always someone grabbing you, like, oh my god, the flower girls are dancing. Like how many times are you gonna take pictures of the same flower girl dancing?
I got pulled this weekend. Hey, grandma's dancing. I was like, listen, auntie, I already got grandma like 100 times already. Like, yeah, relax. So you are starting with 25 and you get it down to about 15 or 16. What about your second? Is that 16? Does that include your seconds cameras or?
Yes, that includes the seconds cameras. So I am incredibly, incredibly fortunate in that I have someone who is really a regular second shooter for me, who shoots the majority of my weddings with me, which I can't even tell you how wonderful that is. I mean, I feel like you all have that benefit already because you're couples. So if you do shoot together, I feel like that makes your life easier immediately because you have somebody who knows, exactly what you, well, we hope.
The husbands are like, yeah.
So you have somebody, who knows exactly what you're going to do. So I am very fortunate that I have somebody who knows my exact workflow. And a lot of times, I tell people who second shoot for me, there's a lot of parts of the day that I don't want you to shoot. And some of those times are like, I would actually prefer them not to shoot for bridal party. I would prefer them not to shoot for family unless it's a very specific task, because I typically don't need alternate angles. It ends up being a lot more important for me to have someone that's straightening people, that's looking for stray hairs, that's getting boutonnieres, that's really just going to like look for detail things and make sure that people are in a nice straight line for me. That they're that the depth of field is going to be good, because I like shooting really wide open. So, and my second that's regular for me knows that. So they have to be really conscious. Like if anybody's in front of somebody else, I want them exact back. I want them on a line. So she's very focused in doing that for me. And then that makes it easier for me to just get a nice shot because they're already, placed for me, rather than getting an alternate angle that is probably not going to be super usable anyway, or something, that my couples are really going to be into. So that's more valuable, in my opinion, than getting, too many frames of something that I'm not going to be able to use. So my seconds they photograph groom prep. And then honestly, if it's a typical day, they may not do photos again until the guests start arriving, because I will have my seconds do guest arrivals. I like to do a little portrait and ceremony. And then they do shoot reception. But even during reception, I have them do something different than what I'm doing. I don't necessarily want them on the dance floor. I would love if they went and got people who are sitting. So, I try to always have them doing something that's very different, because normally whatever I'm doing, I've got what I need. I know exactly what I have. So in doing it that way, it has lowered the frame rate, or I try to lower the frame rate. Like I don't want people to shoot with two cameras. I really just want them to have one camera. I will tell them what lens to put on it. And it sounds so overly finicky, like me even saying this, like I can just feel the hatred from here. But it makes my life easier. And, sometimes I feel like when I tell somebody who's working for me that it's almost like I'm taking away, like their enjoyment, that I don't want them to shoot. And I'm like, I know, but it's better like for the overall day, and for me later, wading through too many images that are just not going to be things that I'm going to put in the gallery. So I've gotten very, very specific about it. But again, it's just because I am photographing so much that I've had to really, like at this point, seconds count. Seconds count, because eventually the seconds add up into minutes, and then the minutes add up in hours. So anything that I can do to keep the process streamlined on the wedding day, and that honestly benefits the couples, because we're moving quick at that point. Like we're getting exactly what we need, and we're doing it in the most efficient manner that we can possibly do it. Like I'm all about efficiency. So I do think it benefits the couples, because they get more time to relax. That's not super, in your face photos. Like we're not usually coming in hot before the ceremony. Everything is usually nicely wrapped up, and we're done, 45 minutes before ceremony, and we're on to something else. But that has been the way that I have, more or less found to use seconds. And that is mostly because I have someone that I do use repetitively.
Mm-hmm. It's almost like you're running a marathon, and this person you're just dragging along to come with you for that marathon. Not even a marathon. It's more like an Iron Man. It's more like an Iron Man. Like, hey,
she's amazing.
The water.
She's amazing though, and she has like a unique, like her skill set. I just feel like, and her ability to anticipate what I need is unique. Like she is very good with me. Like we are a great pair, which is wonderful. I do use a handful of other people, like when I have to, if like, I need to give her a day off or something like that. But, I do use some other people who are,
because you're doing doubles and triples. If you're doing 9 and 9, you're doing doubles and triples.
Yeah, I do.
Even quads.
I do quads.
Jeez Louise. I'm done after a double.
How many have you done already this year?
Just three this year so far.
Okay.
Did one on Friday.
Okay, so the bulk will be later on this year. Wow.
Yeah, it usually picks up for me in March. So March, I think I have maybe 6 this year, 5 or 6, and then April picks up.
So Ro wants to know, like, what's your work-life balance look like?
I mean, I'll be honest, it's the same as if I had a 9 to 5. Honestly, it's better. It's better. Because I'm getting home earlier, I'm home already. So I have a lot of flexibility during the day. And I'm typically done with work earlier doing this than I would otherwise. So, I do have more free time during the week. Do I have as many weekends free as a lot of other people? No. However, this is something I tell people, and I think it's important. I see so many photographers that are upset about working weekends. This is like a common thing, like in the threads. I'm like, oh my gosh, they're upset about working weekends. But weddings are on weekends. So if you don't want to work weekends,
Don't be a
This
wedding
is
photographer.
this is not the career for you. This is a bad fit. Bad fit. Red
Yeah.
flags. Flag
Mhm.
on the play. Like it's just not a good fit for you. So I'm always boggled when I see people who want to do weddings talking about being upset about their weekends. I'm like, there's other types of photography that you can pursue. There is a reason that this industry is hard. And, there's a lot of reasons that we make good money for what we do. And it's because there is a lot of sacrifice involved in it. But, I always understood that I was going to be giving up weekends doing this. And like, I'm at peace with that. But I'm always mind blown when people are very upset about it, like they've just discovered it. Like people, the weddings are not going to be like, you don't like working weekends. We're going to get married on a Tuesday for you. Like that's not what's going to happen. They're not,
Yeah.
you can't make the market bend to you. You have to bend to the market. So
Right.
I'm always just
Yeah.
like, this is a
There's
wild
there's
time.
photographers that give you a discounted rate if you're having a weekday wedding instead of a weekend.
Yeah, but those are so hard to come by. You
Yeah.
wind up doing like what? Maybe
Yeah.
15 a year. Like
Certain
that's hard.
markets,
It
certain markets say
happens.
that,
Yeah. There are definitely, if you are in like an Orthodox Jewish market, they only do weekdays.
Oh, that's right.
Yep,
Yeah,
that's
that's
right.
right.
Yeah.
But it's a very insular market, so it's hard to get into. But I
Mhm.
mean, like,
Mhm.
if you don't want to work weekends, that could be a great market to get into. But for
Mhm.
the most part, like it's a weekend gig.
Elopements, New York City elopements. Those are that's weekday work as
Yeah,
well.
I'm sure if
Mhm.
you're it's funny,
Mhm.
I never really like got into elopements. I don't know
Mhm.
what it is. I seem to like anxiety. I have it and I just seem to feed on it. It's weird. It's weird. I've talked about this with other people because I feel like anxious people tend to be drawn into this industry and it makes no sense. Like literally no sense. Like if you're anxious, why would you go into the most anxiety producing day ever? Like why would you do that to yourself over and over?
The money.
But but my anxiety is actually lowest when I'm at a wedding, which sounds crazy, but it's because I'm so task focused that I almost like
Yeah.
don't have time to be anxious. And that's a very
Mhm.
like to be free of the
Oh, yeah.
anxiety for a day is really nice.
Yeah,
So,
I don't know
Very
about you guys.
distracting.
Yeah, I don't know about you guys, but when I show up on a wedding day, I'm on autopilot, and then like I don't realize the day's over
Oh,
until I get back in the
yeah.
car.
I'm
Yeah.
for the most part like on autopilot too, but there's certain things that will throw a wrench in the wheel for me. Like if I just show up and there's like bad light or someone gave me a bad vibe, you know what I mean?
the
And
vibes,
it's just
the
like
vibes, bro,
yeah,
the vibes.
like someone just gave me an attitude for no reason, and that tends to
How
derail me like
dare
more
you?
than
Vibes
anything.
are off.
Yeah.
I,
And like Jen will see it in my face like when I'm upset or bothered, but I shake it off pretty quickly, just move on. But yeah, like once you're there, like honestly, the couples, if you do a good job at targeting the right clients, like they give you that energy, they give you that adrenaline you need to just get through the whole day with no problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how does one get 99 weddings a year or like 100 weddings a year? I mean,
so
I know the answer. I know the answer, but like I want to hear your answer.
So I tell people this, the more you shoot, the more that you're going to shoot. So it
Mhm.
actually becomes a cycle once you get to a certain point. So I feel like the tipping point is honestly like if you just continue to pick up as much work as you can pick up, I do feel like if you have a certain basis of skill level and a certain, technical competency and you're a pretty good people person, your snowball will roll. And I believe that confidently. I just think that sometimes that snowball takes longer to get started than people want, and they want to accelerate, but there's really no acceleration there. Like you just kind of got to go through the trenches of it, and eventually it'll happen, unless you get lucky.
Mhm.
But a lot of it is just
Mhm.
brutally hard work. For me, it has been word of mouth, but I only am getting that word of mouth because I put in a lot of work on the front end, shooting a lot of weddings. So I have the volume of word of mouth that I have because I shoot a lot of weddings. Which came first, the chicken or the egg? Probably the shooting, because I was doing, like I said, free stuff. Get as much content as you can. I've always given everyone an engagement session because I get a lot of content from them. It's great. And when I meet some people, like if I meet them at their engagement session and we connect, I feel like sometimes they'll immediately start to refer me, which is so sweet. But then I start getting referrals before the wedding even happens. So, and I also used to do family sessions. I don't do them so much anymore just because I've really focused and kind of dialed in on weddings. But when I was doing family sessions, a lot of times I would get wedding referrals from families because they would have siblings that were getting married or other people that were getting married. So I did, for a period, a really high volume of family sessions during the summer. I would do 80 to 100 family sessions, and I would
On
stack
top of the
them.
100 weddings?
I didn't do it. No. All right. So I probably the years that I was doing high volume family sessions, I was probably doing like low 70s weddings. So, I was doing still high volume of family session, which I don't do anymore with this volume of weddings. I did stop doing that because the engagement sessions are now what I really shoot primarily in the evenings. But those family sessions helped a lot because I got a lot of word of mouth from them, which led to more weddings. So then, I mean, they still helped. I don't really need that anymore because I have enough word of mouth referral coming from weddings. But that's only going to work for you, if you have, like I said, a certain level of technical competency and you're a people person enough to really get attached to people. Word of mouth isn't going to be the best for if you have like a more hands-off approach. Like if you're more of a studio, I feel like that's a lot harder because it's me, like they're getting attached to me and I'm always like at my wedding. So I feel like that's much easier to get word of mouth that way. But I have never really done any paid advertising. I am on a bunch of vendor lists, some of which I'm not aware of, which is really funny. So like I get people contacting me and they're like, oh, you're on XYZ's list. And I'm like, oh, really? Okay,
That's cool.
Didn't know, but all right, sounds good to me. So I do have some of that happens, but I've never really run like Facebook ads. I don't do any like ad running. I'm not hyper fixated on SEO. Like I did have someone design my site, and I do blog. Like I have blogs scheduled right now through I think June because that's what I do in the off season. I just will schedule blogs, like weekly blogs through the year. Sometimes I make it to the end of the year. Sometimes I don't. This year I came real close, or last year I came really close, but I didn't quite close the loop on that. I do blog, so people do find me through Googling, and I do a lot of social media, which I have a big love-hate with. Like I hate showing my face on social media, like with the passion of my whole heart. Like I just hate it. I don't like the sound of my voice is like grating to me, and I feel bad for all the people that have to listen to me, but I like hate being on camera. So I do it because a lot of people do find me on Instagram. Not my favorite thing, but I know that I have to be there. So I make silly reels. Like I said, I show up just like I am. I share pictures of my backyard birds, the dogs being crazy. I'm a boater. I share boat stuff. Like I do share a bunch of stuff on social media, and so many people find me on Instagram. It's wild. The social media previews have helped. Posting has helped. The stories have helped. The stories that I do as the same day preview help with vendor networking because I do tag the other vendors on the day. So that helps. There's a bunch of little things that really help, but there's no like magic bullet thing, which I think is what most people want. And there's like no magic bullet to shooting that many weddings. It ends up being an accumulation of so many things, that you do over time, but you have to do them over and over. Like it's not something you can just do once. Like, oh, I posted once, I made a story once, I made this one reel. Like you have to keep doing it. And it's not always rewarding to do, but it does pay off in the long term. You just have to be consistent and, marathon, not a sprint.
So what do you say to the people that say, why do you shoot so much? Why not shoot half and charge double?
Because it would never work that way. So price and booking are not like, they're not perfectly in sync with each other. So if I doubled my price, I would make less money. And I'm like saying that with, I would say basically 100% certainty, just because like the market is a pyramid. So like the amount of really high, like people who are willing to spend like those types of numbers on wedding gets smaller and smaller and smaller as you go up. So, they become harder and harder and harder to come across. So if you do like dramatic price ranges, like if I was a $20,000 photographer, I might only book like 5 per year, and that would be a significant pay decrease for me. So I've tried.
You would still be a $20,000 photographer.
You get to tell everyone that you're a $20,000
right.
photographer.
You can teach about it.
Maybe that would be worth it. But, for me, I've tried to find that balance of maximizing booking versus realistic pricing, to maximize that. Because like I said, I'm in it for a good time, not for necessarily a long time. So I've had to kind of find that middle ground. But people say that to me all the
But
time as
you're not
though
cheap either. From what I
no,
maybe you can remind us what the number is, but I don't think you're cheap either. Where do you start at? 8 hours or 10 hours?
8 hours, and that's 6,300 right now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's yeah.
And then it goes up to I want to say 9,300. So my average
Mhm.
booking is around 7,300.
Yeah, that's
Mhm.
awesome.
Yep.
But that's
That's
a
with
slow burn. That's a really slow burn. So I've
Mhm.
never like over my entire career, the most that I've ever raised pricing is $100 to $200. Those are the biggest increases that I've ever done. So when people talk about dead zones, like this is a discussion that happens in the industry. I see it all the time. Like, oh, you're in
Yeah,
a pricing
right.
dead zone. If you just raise your pricing, you will book more. I like laugh because it's so false. It's so false. There are educators that teach that. And I'm like,
mm,
Oh yeah.
this is the most false of all the false things. This is the one that is the most false. Like it is
Yep.
just unbelievable. Because it's just not true. Like you
Yep.
can book at every single price point. I have booked at
correct.
like literally every single price point. It's always going to be your brand, the consistency of your brand, the consistency of your shooting. You as a person is tied up in there, believe it or not, or like how you're portraying your studio. There are many, many factors that go into booking. Pricing is a big piece, but it's not like the only piece.
Yeah, yeah, just to support what you said. I mean, we started from the bottom as well, and we were booking 40, 50 weddings a year at 2,500, at 3,000, at 35, at 4,000, at 6,000. Like we're pretty much at that same booking pace throughout our entire career. So I agree with you. There's no dead zone. You know what I mean? You just have
No,
to
there's
be
no dead zone. There's only dead marketing. But
Mhm.
I just find it funny that people do seem to think that like price and amount of booking are somehow
connected.
like they are connected, but they act like there's like this direct formula between them. And I'm like,
Mm.
no, there's not, because like once you get to certain price points, the weddings become like exponentially more difficult to net.
Hmm.
You know,
Mhm.
like it's an exponential difference to a point where like you will take a pay cut if you've been booking well and you raise your pricing that much. You know, like it's economics at that point. And I was telling Ben this because I am always mind blown that our industry seems to just ignore like literally econ 101. Like there is
Right.
just
Yep.
this like blinders, like we don't want to know. It drives me insane
They
some
want to
of the
be a
advice.
$20,000 photographer. That's why.
Right,
But
and
You
like
know?
but
year
it's
one, on
also
year one, and they just ignore like basic economics and to some degree like logic. You know,
Mhm.
there are some things that I see people like telling others to do, and I'm like, this is just running awry of like logic, econ 101. Like, where did you get that from? Like, where did you find this?
Mhm.
And it just like it's surprising, but I think that is because, like I said, I'm more focused on the business aspect of it, and I just sometimes it boggles my mind. Like, actually
Yeah.
boggles
Uh,
my mind.
to piggyback on what you just said about, shooting that higher volume, I've been approached by photographers my entire career. You should just double your price, just raise your price, and you could shoot less, earn more, shoot less, right? But the thing is, the calculus that I'm doing also is that if I shoot less, my marketing is also going to be a little harder as well. Because for me, in order for me to sustain a certain volume, I need to have a certain volume to support that referral machine.
That yeah, that exactly right. Well, that's why I said the more you shoot, the more you shoot. So once you
You
start to
know?
throttle that back, like once you start to throttle it down, you're going to come
Yeah.
across a whole new set of, parameters that you're kind of creating for yourself that are going to make booking harder. So
Hmm.
instead of
Mhm.
booking getting easier and easier, booking is going to get harder and harder because you're going to lose some of your word of mouth. Like you're going to price some people out who would have otherwise been your clients because they're coming from your current referral sources, like friends of
Hmm.
friends. A lot of people are in economically similar situations.
Hmm.
So you're really going to like change your landscape, and it's going to become harder to book.
Hmm.
So, like those types of price jumps, like that always, so people say that to me so frequently, like it's the answer, like it's literally like the perfect answer for me. Like, if you just raise your prices, you could just work less. And I'm like, I'm not here to make anybody work as much as I do. I'm not the boogeyman underneath your bed that's like, you should shoot 99 weddings, like, or else, like it's not for everybody. It is not for everybody.
Hmm.
Um, But I feel like there should be some normalization of like it is okay if you want to work more, because I do feel like I get people snubbing their noses at me all the time. Like I'm a monster when they hear that I do as many as I do. I think part of it is it's almost like an anger.
How
um
dare you work so hard, and how dare you take all these
yes.
bookings away from us that we could
Yeah,
have
How dare
gotten?
you make so much
it's
money?
it's like an anger. It's like an anger. And I'm like, but you could do it too, but you're choosing not to. You know, like
Not to.
you are
Yeah.
choosing
Yeah.
to work 18 to 20 a year, and that's fine. Like by all means, like you should do that if
Mhm.
that's what's right for you. But then, don't get upset at the way that I'm running my business, but also don't go into Facebook groups and say that you're having trouble booking, because
Mm,
like these things are all interconnected.
mhm.
Like it's
There's
all
also
interconnected.
I'm sorry. There's also this perception if you're doing such high volume that you're not charging
Mhm.
enough. Oh, that's this person must be cheap if they're booking that many. And usually that's not the case either.
Yeah, no, it's probably, I mean, like a lot of times I think it's the opposite, because the more
Hmm.
you shoot, the more you shoot. So it actually gets easier and easier to book the more that you work. It's just interesting. That's why our industry is so interesting. And I do feel like this is the pricing on the site thing and the transparency. I've always been really into it and displaying pricing, but I have seen a million and one arguments from educators as to why you should not do that, because you
Do
want to
what?
market to people like on the call, list your pricing on your site, like why you shouldn't do that.
Oh,
Like put all the pricing out there.
yeah, 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 yeah.
I've always put out the pricing. But I
Right.
see a lot of, people saying like, oh, well, like if you don't put your pricing on the site, like you can sell later on when people, reach out and call. And I'm like, but you're actually like eliminating a whole group of people from even contacting you, because when they don't see a price, they're just straight up like not going to contact you. So I've
Hmm.
always had the pricing in full on my site. And I attribute that to also being a reason why I've been able to book as much as I book. And it's because most of the leads that I get are qualified, because the pricing is already out there. We've already, like, they know exactly what they can book and, what's available. And we don't, like, that's not where I lose them later on, so
I
everybody who
also
comes in.
Yeah, I also feel like they're also pre-qualified in another way, is that they are coming in as a referral too. You say a lot of your work comes to word of mouth, so in that
Mhm.
way, they're more inclined to book with you. Referrals tend to have a higher closing rate, regardless.
But
Yep.
but also at when you're booking and doing that many weddings, the amount of inquiries you must get are way higher than most people, right? So you also don't want to be entertaining people that are not nowhere near in that ballpark of what your services cost, right? So we ended up doing that. Like was it like about a year and a half ago? Because we were meeting with so many people and it was just wasting our time. And now after we started doing that, the people that we do meet with are more inclined to book because they already know what the pricing is. They know that it's in their budget. They're not wasting our time.
Mhm.
Oh, 100,
Right.
100%. And I always view it as like, I don't want to waste time on both sides. So I don't want to waste their
Hmm.
time. I don't
Hmm.
want them to waste my time. So the only way that I can fix that is by, I want them to see the pricing upfront, like first thing. And I always liken it to, there's so many luxury brands. So like if you're shopping for a BMW, or even if you're shopping for like a Bentley, like you can build a car and price it online and know if you can afford that vehicle or
Yep.
that item. Tiffany's has all of their pricing on their site. You can go shop any luxury, like for the most part, any luxury brand that I've ever stumbled upon, all the pricing is really transparent on the site, and you can either afford it or you can't afford it. So I've just
Right.
never understood why our industry is unique in the fact that they just don't want the pricing on the site. Like if I was shopping for a refrigerator and like I went on Home Depot's site and there was no pricing on the refrigerators, I would be like, I'm not going to buy a refrigerator here because
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
I
I
can't
know why.
tell.
I know why. I've spoken to some folks who resisted putting their pricing online because
I
they
know
feel
what
like they
they
can sell
say
their
is the
value.
logic.
They want to sell their value on the call, and they want to increase the volume of calls. But the thing is, I don't think
But
that's
they're
how
not gonna
luxury shoppers are actually
they're not
shopping.
gonna call you if they don't know the pricing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you're never going to move somebody that has a $2,000 budget to a $7,000 budget. Or
Correct.
honestly, nor should you, because I feel like
Mhm.
that's what paves the way for issues later on. Because that would be such a, like, say you did, like, say you're operating underneath that logic, because like, just like Ben said, like, that is how that is explained, like that philosophy. Like, well, don't put your pricing on your site, because then when people reach out, they can actually connect to you, and then they're like attached to you before you give them the pricing. Like, that's kind of how it's, like you market to them at a later point. But I just don't know if it's even smart to attempt that type of, like, if they're not in the budget for the service and you talk them into it, I feel like that's when you run into like extreme buyer regret at a later point. Like,
Hmm.
there becomes so much riding on that it's almost like, oh my gosh, like, should someone have stretched their budget like that far? Because now they might be uncomfortable with the process or the booking. And like, I just think that happens more times than people think. And that can pave the way for problems in the relationship, like at a later point. So then that referral situation, again, like anytime that you lose trust in this industry, it's a huge deal. This industry is built on trust. So anytime that I can, connect and build trust with a couple, I am 100% going to take that opportunity and be as transparent as I can in every part of the process, because all those little nuggets add up at the end of the day, in terms of
Mhm.
how much they're going to trust me at their event. I feel like that, it isn't talked about a lot, but I feel like it's a huge deal. Like, you don't want to do anything that's like not transparent or not trustworthy, because it's the biggest day, like it's the biggest day they're ever going to have. So, it's really, really important to them. So I just feel like it starts even there, with the whole pricing thing.
Mhm.
Mhm.
So let's talk to the folks who are just starting out, right? All of us are on the screen, collectively, we're shooting not 20, 30 weddings a year. We're shooting a lot more than that. But speaking to the folks who are struggling to get bookings, who are, maybe they're just started, or maybe they're veterans. Actually, I saw a Facebook post, been shooting 15 years and no bookings whatsoever, right? So what would you say to someone like that? Like, what are some of the things that you can do to kind of, what should your next steps be if you want to start getting inquiries coming in?
If you find yourself in that position and you've been in the industry for a long time, this is going to sound really brutal, but I think that you need to take a brutal look at yourself, because there's a disconnect that's happening somewhere. It's going to be either with your branding, your website, the work, the pricing. There's like five, like your social media presence. There's like 5 or 6 pieces of like where the problem could be. And you're going to have to look at each of those pieces and be brutal with it. You're going to have to look at your portfolio and be like, is all of this really curated and consistent? You're going to have to look at your branding and be like, does this look professional? Is this logo clear and easy to understand? Like, is the site all together? Like, am I portraying myself as someone who's approachable that couples are going to want to book? Like, you're going to have to go through everything that you've got with a fine tooth comb. And I would do that first. I would literally like be brutal with yourself. It's going to be hard. It's not going to be pleasant, but go through it. If you're not posting on social media enough, make a plan where you can, and you can keep it cohesive and consistent. Like, it's going to be a lot. And then once you've done all of those behind the scenes pieces, I would say, then start generating content, because then you have to start, you know, doing social media content again, but with your pared down, more consistent work, or your corrected whatever the problem was. Because there's a problem, there's like a disconnect, and you got to figure it out. Because if you don't figure out the disconnect, it's not going to make booking any easier. You're going to fight for every single booking. Like, you can do ads, you can always run ads, and you might net people, but then you're going to become dependent on spending, like on ad spend. Like, you can do it that way, like you can force the the shoe on the foot and do ad spend, but I feel like that's not a good foundation, and it becomes very difficult to sustain. Like, that can be a piece of your marketing, but I think it's very difficult to make it the whole enchilada. But I would say, like, be brutal, go through everything that you've got, make sure that your work is consistent, look at what's selling right now, like look at the market. What are people really into? What is your Instagram what does your Instagram for you page look like? Like, what are people gravitating towards right now? I will tell you, it is that really organic, disposable camera look, which I have leaned into, but they want that nostalgia. They want that nostalgia. So if you can, kind of refocus and angle your work a little bit more towards that, I think that alone will even start to, get people's attention to look over at you. But I just feel like it's so many pieces if you've been in the industry for a long time. If you're just getting started, I think that it's fair to just start generating content. because you're going to have to figure out the rest of that at some point later, anyways. But if you're literally just beginning, you just want to start working. It's probably going to be for free, but, start working. Just start shooting, get your friends, get your family, invite yourself to family parties or friends parties, whatever, and just start generating content, post it on social. That's free stuff that you can do, and it'll get your foot in the door and it'll start you booking. And then you can start formulating your brand, because you don't have all that stuff yet, but you can start formulating that around what you're already working on. In some ways, I think it's harder when you're established, because that's when you have to look at what you've already been doing through a really harsh lens. Because I've done that for myself. Like every once in a while, I look at my work and I'm like, we need to get a little harsh with this, and is this still what people want? Because I don't want to become that photographer from 1985, that's producing that, and people are like, oh, Kelly's a dinosaur, she's a dinosaur.
That's a tough pill to swallow.
Let's get some feedback from Mrs. Lau here as well. She's been quiet for the last hour 25.
I thought she froze it and left. She just froze it.
My mind is somewhere else.
Yeah, but Karis Lau, for those of you guys who don't know, she started from, I wouldn't say ground zero, but she started her brand almost from ground zero, because the thing is, we have to start from scratch. All those relationships and referrals that she got were on her own. So why don't you describe that process, babe?
Well, I don't really have client referral right now because I didn't shoot that many yet. People
she just has a lot of vibes. That's what
Vibes.
it is.
Vibes work. Vibes go a pretty far way.
People find me from most random places. I get inquiries from venues that I've never shot just randomly, and I very rarely go back to same venue, except for this one venue that I go back to all the time.
Which she stole from me, by the way. The one that she stole from me.
What venue?
Whatever. Sure.
Karis came out the gate shooting though very trendy and in style from the jump. I think that's
her first year. She hit 20 weddings. Her first year, 20 weddings.
She was already on that trend, on that style of but not saying that she did it to be trendy, but that's just how she shoots, which is more quirky, and more authentic, which is what people are looking for now, as opposed to her coming out the gate being a magma type shooter or something like that. That wouldn't have worked for her. She was very much of being real, and I'm going to do blur. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do all this weird stuff. And I think that helped her a lot, for sure.
I'm probably going to get a lot of shit for this, but that Bagmont style is dying. All right? And I'm going to say it again.
No. Bro, you can't say that. You got to say, guys, keep doing that Bagmont style. Keep it up.
Yes, keep doing those color gel silhouettes.
That's what's going to get you clients. That's what you got to shoot. You got to keep shooting that style. All right?
Yeah.
But I will say, though, what Karis hasn't touched on, also, and we kind of talked about it today as well, she didn't come out the gate and say, hey, listen, I have 10, 12 years of experience. I should command this price. All right. I have the portfolio. I have the experience to prove it. She knew that coming in as a quote unquote newcomer, right, where nobody knows who she is and what she can do, because she never made a name for herself, right, that she had to start from the bottom too, just like everybody else. And I think babe, what did you start? Where did you start? At 4,000 or less than that?
Yeah, 4,000, 45.
Yeah. Now she charges more than I do, Kelly.
But I love that though, because it's unpopular, in this industry to do that. But the market is always going to determine what you're able to charge. It's always going to tell you. So, the easiest way to figure it out is to start at kind of a boilerplate. So it's not to jump crazy high and start there, because it's really hard to pull back once you're higher.
Yep.
I feel like that is more difficult to pull back. So anytime people ask me, I say, well, you got to find your boilerplate first. So that might mean you shoot a couple of weddings for much lower prices. But once you find your footing at that lower price, then you'll have a better grasp on where you're able to sit in the market. So it's much easier to start lower and then find your footing and climb than it is to come out of the gate with an unrealistic price. Because if you are in the industry for a while and you're not booking, that can also work against you and become problematic. Because if you've just been sitting and you have no content, my dog is squeaking your toy, you can probably hear it. But there's, if you start too high, like that actually can kind of be a negative, I feel like. So it's
Definitely.
just much, but nobody wants to find that boilerplate. You know, like they're not willing to do that when they first start. And I'm like, but it's important. It's actually kind of important because that'll get your, like, that'll start your inquiries coming. You don't want to turn the faucet off. You want to turn it on, you know, like you
Right.
want to start them pouring in instead of like limiting them immediately.
Yeah.
But again, that's one of those things where I'm like, what the advice people get, it's like at odds with just logic. You know, like I see what educators are teaching, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is like
Yeah.
full on at odds with like this.
I've had educators come by. Well, actually, I've not come by, but like I hear them talking about like, you know, every couple of bookings, you know, at $300, every couple of bookings at 500. I'm like, that makes zero sense whatsoever. You know, if you know, the way that I'm teaching my students, like, listen, just build that marketing machine first, okay? Build it out first, get that volume up, get that get that referral marketing machine going first, and then you start raising your rates. Doesn't make sense for you to keep raising your rates until they start saying no.
That's not
Yeah, no, that
sustainable.
makes no sense. It makes no
Yeah.
sense.
You know,
If you
like,
shoot 100 weddings and you keep raising $200, like, come on.
Right.
Kelly's at
right.
30,000
there's
client right now.
there's a ceiling. You know, there's always going to be a ceiling. So it's not like, and that's also what makes the market this market interesting, because I do feel like there's always going to be somewhat of a ceiling on what, you know, wedding photography is going to be perceived for worth, you know, like worth wise. I think that is true for everything, but I think it's really true for creative fields, you know, like more so than even like venues or other parts of, you know, like the wedding industry. I feel like for creative fields, there's probably like the ceiling is a little bit different than it is for other you know, products or services that have more of like a tangible worth, because our worth is intangible. So I feel like that's what makes the pricing even harder.
but it can be
Because
tangible. It
can be tangible. I sell a lot of albums. I actually sell a lot of albums. It can be tangible, but you know, the majority of what they see is intangible that you're doing.
Are you doing IPS calls with them too? Or are they pre-purchasing in the package?
They pre-purchase albums.
So
I
you
don't
don't
do
do
any IPS, no. So what I've found just in my travels is, again, I sell a lot of albums, but it's because I do a lot of albums. So I share albums a lot on my social media. I have selected albums that are really beautiful and really timeless. Like I love and adore them. Like for myself, they're gorgeous. Like if I were to get an album of photos, it's exactly what I would want. So I put a lot of time into picking and curating something that's really, really beautiful. And I put them on social media a lot because people do like to see them. They like to see the unboxing. So I feel like the more unboxings I do, the more people get albums. And I do have options for upgrades. And a lot of people do end up upgrading the albums. And it's really like they do that completely on their own. So I don't do anything that I consider to be high pressure. So that's just me as a person. I feel like I'm unable to sell anything that I personally am not like 100% in on. And I do not react well to high pressure sales in any universe. Like I actually recoil to high pressure sales, and I can just see through those tactics. It's just an unpleasant experience for me. I've been sold to that way before. There's some industries that really thrive on that, and I just personally do not like it. So for me, like, and I'm not saying it's a bad thing. Like if you have somebody that really believes in that process, I mean, a lot of people do it to great effect. But for me, I can't get into it and I don't respond well to it. So I can't do it that way. But I do get a lot of upgrades. The majority of my couples do end up doing what I call double sizing their album. And a lot of them end up getting like parent albums and other items too, which is completely something that they do on their own. You know, and usually just from seeing what they look like and, you know, like me sharing it on social. So that part has come pretty easily, fortunately, but no IPS. I think it's a skill all in itself. And, you know, like I have a lot of respect for it, but it's just not something that I was ever able to believe in to a degree where, you know, like my face always has like the subtitles of what is going through my head. I can't. Like, there's just no way around that for better or worse. Like, it just is what it is. I have like RBF really bad just because when I'm thinking, I'm like, my face is just so dead. So I'm like, anything that I can't 100% like get behind, I can't do.
Yeah.
Um,
It takes a certain personality and there's certain traits
Yeah.
to be able to do that type of sales, in my opinion.
Mhm.
it does. It does.
You've been on the call with us for an hour and a half. We've been pretty serious for the last hour and a half, right? Let's wrap up with something fun, right? So you guys, out of let me see. At this point, you're probably looking at about almost 1,000 weddings in your career at this point,
Mhm.
probably, right? You have any horror stories or something funny that happened at a wedding or something scandalous that happened?
You know what's wild? I actually get this question a lot because I do so much volume. And I have been so incredibly fortunate in my career that I don't really I don't have any incredible horror stories. Like the horror stories that I have are like timeline was too tight or like really like silly inconsequential things in the grand scheme of it. And I do think that's because like I'm a very personal brand and I tend to attract people that I would just get along with in real life. So most of my clients end up being such a good match for me that I've just never seen like anything super wild happen. I think like years and years ago, there was an uninvited guest who was like a family member and like somebody was talking that they were going to fight, but like nobody ever actually fought. But I mean like that's like if I'm using that as like my wild
They almost
story,
fought.
like everybody could fight at any point, but nothing like super crazy that like stands out. I've been really really fortunate even in terms of like couples or families that have been difficult. I can literally count one and it was a family
Great.
member. It was not the couple, it was a family member that was just very cruel, and I think they were very unhappy like with themselves and took it out on like, their vendors, but like it wasn't even the couple. I think there was just so much more to that story, and that was like years ago at this point. But I've just been super fortunate in that many weddings doing such a high volume. And also, I have this gift of like not noticing when people are mean to me when I'm working. It's a gift because people can say like rude things to me and I'm just like, okay, cool, like awesome, like we'll talk later. And that's genuine. Like it will literally go like way I'm the worst sweat stain ever. I'm like right over my head. Like I just don't notice. My dog is also, that's like a grunty gator that she loves. It's terrible noise. But when people are rude, I don't notice. So it doesn't ruin my day, which is really, really helpful. Like I've 100% had like a couple of parents who like my second will be like, oh, that was a little, that was a little mean. And I'm like, oh, really? Oh, I had no idea. I didn't notice that until like much later in the day, which is so beneficial when you're oblivious. Like if you're an oblivious person, like that's awesome for me because I'm just like doing my day.
And you
I don't
had like
even know.
a parent say something mean to you?
I had apparently, yeah, I was actually more concerned that they were being mean to my second, short with my second. And I was actually a lot more worried about that. And I didn't even notice that they were being mean to me until it was like really in front of my face. Like it was like, we were having a conversation. It was about downtime. Downtime. Like it took a lot for me to even become aware. Because all day I was just kind of like, whatever. It's a high stress environment. Weddings are like pressure cookers. So, you get the best of people, but you also get the worst of people. So I always try to keep that in mind. When you have family dynamics, it's not always sunshine and roses, and that stresses a lot of people out. So I just always come at it like from that lens of like, that's probably not how this person is in their daily life. It's probably just because they're literally in a pressure cooker right now and every crack is going to show. Like, I don't think I would be the best version of myself in, that scenario playing out. Like, that's just not where I'm going to thrive. Like, I'm like really low key. So if I was put in a high stress situation, like it was my wedding, I think I would not be like the nicest, best version of myself. So like, I get it.
Well, I know a thing or two about angry parents. I think I had one.
Oh, yeah.
I had one in my whole career. Angry brides, not so much. I get like with the volume that I do, if I get one upset client a year, the odds are still in my favor. And and a lot of times when this happens, it's usually because we took a client that I kind of ignored the red flags or I didn't notice it and realize it or whatever. But yeah, I had one angry mom. She said like it was the meanest thing I've ever heard. She actually wrote me two emails. I didn't read the second one, but the first one, she said that I wouldn't know what it would mean to be a wedding photographer. It was stapled to my face, right? How mean was that? It ruined my Halloween. I remember this. It was Halloween day because I had bought a new costume to go to my kids' Halloween parade. And I was so upset that I didn't go to the parade. I had this perfect costume. It was a suit. It was a suit with pumpkins. Have you guys seen this yet? It was a
No.
suit with little pumpkins. It's like pumpkins all over the suit. I was gonna
Aw.
go to this parade, and I got this email from this mom, and I was so injured. I think it took me like a whole 6 months to recover. But you're absolutely right. You know, you attract what you put out. The energy that you put out, that's what you're gonna get. Well, that's a hope anyway, right?
Yep.
I mean, it's hard, and I feel like it's important. I was just talking about this with somebody else, but because we do it all the time. Like we're at weddings all the time. It's normal for us. Like weddings are normal for us. But I always try to just think like we're at somebody's most important day. They're probably only going to do this once. They dreamt of this day their entire life. Their families like dreamt of this day their entire life. And this is like big deal. So little things are big things. Like little things are always going to be big things. So, for them, like this is a one time, like once in a lifetime shot to make this perfect. So I always try to like come at it from like that lens and that perspective because it does put it so much more in perspective instead of just being like, oh, like I do this every weekend. Like I know how things are going to go. I know exactly how, this is going to happen. And I do. And 9 out of 10 times it does work out the way that I thought it was going to work out. But how I'm communicating with the couple and how I try to handle the situations, like I always try to approach it from like this is their big day, like this is it, like they've been dreaming about this, they have spent a lot of money, years of planning, like this is really important, and if it's important to them, it's important to me. And I think that has helped me enormously too. Being able to stay in that
So
That's great.
headspace.
what are you working now? What does Kelly C have in the pipeline for the next year and the years coming? What do you got? What are you working on?
So I have obviously I have my weddings for this year. I hopefully I'll probably end up I would say around 80. I'll probably end up
Yeah.
around 80. My dogs are witching hours starting. So probably around 80 for this year. I'm already pretty well booked for next year. I think I have like 30. So weddings are like, looking solid for the next couple of years at least.
Mhm.
I've been having so many people ask me just after the other podcast, which I never thought would happen. I've been having a lot of people ask me about like education type things, which is just something I never thought that I would get into. I think in general, I'm really boring. I don't think I do anything crazy. I think I've just adapted to what we do. And just like I said, I've just streamlined it. So I never thought that would be something that people would be into. Like I never wanted to do anything education related unless I had something quality to say, because otherwise like there's a million people that have good info. Like why would anybody care? But I have been having a lot of people ask me about like the workflow situation, about Adobe Camera Raw. People are curious now. People are curious about the workflow. People are curious about, like the consistency and keeping consistency when you're shooting. So I was toying around with like starting something like education related just to do the workflow. I don't think I'm not going to shape my business around it because I'm still very much a wedding photographer, but I have been asked so much that I'm definitely starting to just kind of formulate something. It's just going to take me a while to
Mhm.
formulate it, but I have all the other like it's my off season, I just focus on other things. So like I'm just doing my blogging right now. Like I have cycles of just different activities that I do depending upon the season. Like now I just catch up with all the stuff that I otherwise didn't have. But I definitely plan to just continue shooting wedding volume for the next, for the foreseeable future, next,
Hmm.
5 to 7, 8 years.
Hmm.
um Financially just kind of secure myself and then maybe lean a little bit heavier into that educational aspect. I mean, hopefully having shot as much as I've shot, I will have something worthwhile to contribute, but who
That's the
who
thinking, right?
knows?
That's the idea.
I
I mean,
think
it's
Who knows? For better or
it's
worse
still
at this
it's
point.
still better. I think that the information that would be coming from you would still be more qualified than the folks who.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. When people see
Mhm.
someone actually doing it, like actually have proof of numbers and still active in shooting weddings, what that's what people want to learn from. Like, it's people that people want to learn from, not the people that are telling you to double your prices and all this stuff. Those people are not shooting weddings. They're doing like 2 weddings a year. That's not the people that I
Yeah.
would like to learn from. You want somebody that's hitting the ground running, that's in the trenches and can show you what they're doing.
Right. If you're shooting 10 weddings a year or 15 weddings a year, I'm sure you have some good knowledge and stuff, but like, I'm not sure if it's going to be as qualified as someone who does
Who's
100 weddings a
still
year.
doing it today.
50 or
Right,
100
right.
weddings, whatever that number is. But if you're only doing 10, 15 weddings a year, I don't know how much I can learn from you. So
Yeah, and I mean, it's funny. I was listening to oh my gosh, I don't even know where like this girl, the podcast that she came on. It might have been I listened to like a little bit of the vendor table one too, like not
Hmm.
religiously, but I'll catch an episode every once in a while. So they had on a social media like influencer photographer. I had never heard of her before. And because of the line of questioning that they were asking her, I was just curious about like her shooting because she was talking a lot about like essentially like wedding photographer and photographer education. And I was like, oh, like maybe she just like hit the ground running and was shooting a lot. And she doesn't, so I was like listening to it, and just from my perspective, like the volume that I do and knowing that I wouldn't have nearly the breadth of experience or information that I have if I was only doing 10 a year, which is what she's doing. I was surprised to like hear the advice that she was giving like on the podcast, and it's strictly just because I have a different like lens than she
Hmm.
would. But I was just kind of like, oh my gosh, that would have been like me doing education 2 years in when I was doing like 10, 15 weddings a year, and I didn't have super good information at that point to contribute.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying
There's a
like she
new
might have gotten like, maybe she had a crazy experience in the beginning. I didn't listen to enough to really like make, a crazy judgment call. But when I was like thinking, back because she's earlier in her career, I was just kind of like, oh, like if I had talked at that, if I had done education at that point in my career, it would definitely not be the same as something that I would say at this point in my career. Educators in this field, there's no real, like, there's no barrier to entry. There's no, there's no college that's like certifying any educator. There's no way to figure it out, which makes it interesting.
There's a new level of generation of photographer influencers, like you mentioned, and there's a ton of them, which I give them respect. They know how to play the Instagram game and the social media game. They are excellent, and that's just their generation. That's what they know how to do. We didn't grow up with that. We didn't start our businesses with that. So they, like you mentioned, don't shoot as much, but they know how to influence and teach, and even just the basics that you need to do to make a reel of like how to use your new Fuji, like, and then they blow up and they have 500,000 followers, and they're basically just influencers, if you can say that.
Yes.
Like, I don't know, like how much you mentioned, you could actually learn from them about how to run a business.
But
it'll be interesting to
to
see
be like
where
them.
everyone wants to be like
Yeah.
them. But if you look behind the curtain, and we say this all the time, you have to look behind the curtain and see what's actually being done. Because if I know how to play the Instagram game, that's different than actually like being able to run a fully successful business, and for how long.
Oh, I so agree. And I feel like playing the Instagram game helps, like it absolutely does. But being able to play the Instagram game specifically like to further your photo business, because you can play the Instagram game and you can go viral, but it's not necessarily going to equate to bookings. Like it's hard because you can be like an influencer on Instagram. Like she probably, if you need to get a viral reel, I'm sure that, she has a lot of good insight on that. But it's like, can you get a viral reel that's actually going to increase your bookings and, like kind of further your photography end of it? I feel like that's the harder piece.
I agree with that.
It'd be very interesting to see where like those influencers are.
Well,
like 10 years.
Here's the thing: those people are not marketing to clients like how we are. They're marketing to photographers and brands, and manufacturers, and all these vendors in the industry. They're the ones throwing money at them. So it's a different sandbox that we're playing in.
Mm-hmm.
So have you guys all made your piece?
Yes.
Yeah, we have.
That'll be a whole other conversation episode.
Have you made it? All right. Well, Kelly, I mean, we're so incredibly happy to finally get you on one of our recordings.
Your dog is so ready to play with you.
They're going nuts right now. Right? They're just like running. She's like running in circles over there.
Yeah, but before we let you go, how can our listeners find you?
So on Instagram, I am Kelly C Images, C like the ocean, SEA. I'm on Facebook, Kelly C Images Theme, and the website is www.kellycimages.com.
That's pretty easy.
Awesome.
Well, awesome. Well, thank you so much for hanging out with us today.
Thank you
Jen,
so
we-
much for having me. I'm so excited that we were able to do it. I really wish that I was able to come up. Like, I really, really wish that I was able to, but
Maybe there'll be a part
We
two.
do-
We'll see.
we do part 2, and we have like another therapy session.
Uh-huh.
Yes,
What's your
absolutely.
favorite intimate snack?
I honestly, I go through phases. Like, I was so in like all in the cakes recently, but now I'm into like the little soft baked cookies. Like, I do it all. Like, I love the pound cake. I love the frosted cakes. Like,
The chocolate donuts.
Pound cake
yeah,
is where
oh,
it's
the
at.
chocolate donuts. Oh my god, the chocolate donuts are the
Yes.
best. Like, I don't discriminate. I
The
don't
mini ones, the
discriminate.
donuts,
The
or
mini
the
ones
big
or
one?
the big ones.
No,
Either.
the big ones,
Go
the
both.
ones that are like it's a vanilla donut, but it's like chocolate
Chocolate
covered,
frosted. Yeah,
coated.
chocolate frosted. Yeah.
Yeah.
Why limit yourself?
Oh my
You know,
God.
why limit yourself?
They're amazing.
I'll eat a whole box, so that can't be allowed in the house.
I haven't had that in like over a decade.
Well, for part 2, that's what we're gonna do. Okay, we're just gonna like
Sentiments.
we'll just do some intimates.
Well, thank you for joining us for another episode of Focused AF. You can check us out on Instagram and see behind the scenes and snippets of all our recent episodes at focus.af. And yeah, thank you so much.
You can find us on YouTube. The
Oh, yeah,
Focused
on
AF
YouTube.
podcast.
Yes, all our YouTube is up. So click like and subscribe, guys.
Smash that subscribe button.
There we go.
Smash it, smash it. Well, Kelly, thank you so much for hanging out with us.
Oh my
this should
gosh,
be up-
thank you guys. Thank
This
you.
is gonna be
Nice
up
meeting
by
you.
it'll be up by July 4th.
Perfect.
Bye.
Focused AF is a fun, business-focused podcast for wedding creatives.
Co-hosted by award-winning husband and wife wedding photography teams Ben and Karis.
And Jen and Ro, where we help fellow wedding creatives with their sales and marketing.
With laid-back conversations and real talk with some of our most favorite people in the universe.
And with that being said, are you focused AF?
I am Focused AF today.
We are Focused AF.
I think I might be Focused AF.
Welcome to the Focused AF podcast.